Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pedophile Huntress. We're here with a common goal that you be encouraged in heart and united in love. I have a new guest with me tonight. She and her husband run a nonprofit called PPE Kids, I think it is, and we're going to be talking about that. That is Sonia and Bob. Oh, let me remember your last name. Wilson. I'm so sorry. And they're here with us. I actually saw their work when I was out on Twitter and I was so excited about what they do. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight. But Sonia, in your own words, could you just kind of tell us what this nonprofit is about? I think it's just so beautiful when you guys hear about it. This really is exciting, but I want you to tell me in your own words. I've gone out and looked at your websites, and I think it's just a beautiful thing that you do. Could you just bring the listener into that, and then we'll go a little bit more personal. But right now, let's just talk about your nonprofit for a minute.
Okay, so what we do is we train people, organizations, anything that is child facing. So, daycares, churches, um, anything like that that works with children. We train them on how to spot signs of abuse, and also how to um, kind of redirect. So we have different classes about grooming and what are some of the red flags, and we have classes about um, um, of how to spot someone who is doing things that are make a child uncomfortable, and how to kind of redirect that action so that everybody so the child doesn't feel uncomfortable, and the person doesn't feel attacked, but you still redirect the situation. And then I'm a facilitator for Darkness to Light stewards of children. So I can
Okay.
certify people so they can get a certification and CE credits for that training as well. So and I've broken it down to two parts, that just because it's actually like 2.5 hours, but people don't have a lot of time. That's a big time commitment for some people, so I break it up into two parts. But that's one class, and then we have the grooming, active bystander, and then we have how to have difficult conversations with your children. It's like a webinar. We kind of all get together and talk and kind of discuss methods to
Super cool.
have difficult conversations with your children, so that you can find out what's happening in their life. And we also offer background checks for organizations, where we'll check, we'll do quarterly and regular checks for organizations to make sure that the people that are working with them, especially at churches,
Mhm.
because a lot of time the churches, they don't have funds to get
Right.
someone there. And so they take all the volunteers they can get, which is wonderful. However, a lot of times, child molesters can be predators, and they'll travel, and they look for they
Mhm.
look for cracks, and cracks in the armor there, so they can sneak in and gain access to a child. And so even if you have an usher, they'll take anything, as long as it means that they're an authority figure to a child. So it's really important to make sure that you're doing those sex offender background checks, those criminal background checks, and we offer policies for that. We offer sample policies, and we can make, because I have 20 years of human resources experience.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
so
Right.
I offer my experience to go in and write these policies for them that match whatever laws of the states they're in. Because I've done, HR in numerous states in different
Hmm.
areas. So I'll go and write those policies for them, so that they can support what they want to do. We have the Child Safe Pledge, where, yeah, and we want to, where they can post it up and have people read it, sign off on it, agree to it, and it states in there different things that they promise to
Mm.
do to keep children safe. Um, and we just started a new thing now. It's called survivor stories, and we're putting out things. We want people to share their stories, because a lot of times people have people have these awful things happen to them, and they have no outlet. They have nobody to talk to.
Right.
People don't believe them. People are people, because a lot of times people don't believe more. The person who did it died.
Yes, I do know.
Yeah, exactly. You have to fight that,
Yes, I
right?
do know.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we decided that what we'll do is I share my stories, but I share mine in a way that gives you a lesson to go back and use to protect children. So,
Which is beautiful.
when they share theirs, we're going to give them a space where they can share it anonymously. They we can record it for them, but we'll put it on our site and we'll share your story so people can, so at least it's out there. And it starts that first step of healing, of getting it out there, saying, this is my truth. This happened to me. I don't care what you said.
Mm-hmm.
This happened, and it happened to me, and it was awful. And I want people to know that this happened to me. So, that's, and
Yeah,
that's,
it's so good. You've said so much already. I want to go back for just a minute. No, it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. But I want to dissect a little bit about what you said, because first you talked about time and you said people don't have time. You know, what's interesting to me is that predators certainly have time. They can groom a child, you guys, for a year, months, weeks, I mean, a long time. So I just want people listening to think about what she just said, in the sense of you don't have time for a 2.5 hour class to keep babies safe in an environment where they
yeah.
are vulnerable. So I don't know.
And
I just thought that was very interesting that pedophiles will spend eons of time to groom a child. So
and
y'all
his
listening, right? I mean, doesn't that make sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, because remember, groomers, pedophiles, they don't just groom the parent, they don't just groom the child, they groom everyone around the child because they got to gain
100%.
access to the child. So they're not just grooming them, they're grooming everybody. So they always appear as these nice, trustworthy people,
Hmm.
and you think that because they've groomed you too. So you're surprised, but you've been groomed too. So they groom everybody, and they're
And I love that. Talk about that a little bit, because it's so true. I listened to the Michael Jackson, those two men that did a documentary,
yeah.
and it was amazing to me that Michael would call the family and say, "Come get me. I'm in need." And the whole family would race
Well,
to
just
get
go.
him.
We gotta save
I,
Michael. Like,
oh my, well, and so it's so important what you just said. And I love to hit on these notes because the work that you're doing is so vitally important. Because what family thinks is, oh my gosh, this person wants to be part of our family. They're grooming the whole family. I actually don't
really,
think I've ever talked about that on this channel. Talk about that a little bit more, because they're
it's
very smart, aren't they?
they are. They're very, and they've been watching, and they look for a vulnerable child, and they look for and they look for a lot of things. They look for a vulnerable child and a vulnerable caregiver, and they figure out what needs they need to fulfill to come after to get that child. Because most children, the ones that take children, they do that all, that's a small percentage of child abuse, child sexual abuse.
Right.
Most of the time it's happening by someone the child knows. And a lot of times, it's someone, it's that uncle who just won't you, who's always coming over. It's that auntie who always wants to babysit, and that's what it is. And it's always where they look for the holes so they can kind of sneak in there and start filling it in. I think that's why a lot of people have a hard time believing that someone did that, but they don't realize, you don't believe it because you've been groomed as well.
It's
It's their,
so true. That's
they don't get
wonderful,
that.
Sonia.
They've been groomed too. That's why they don't believe it. And so, it's that grooming, that grooming not only does it stay with the child for years to come, but it stays with the parents because they don't trust well either. They get triggered too. They don't realize it, but that stays with them too. And it's a very it's a nasty game what they do, and they mess with the child, for the rest of their lives, and it's just subtle little red flags you need to look for.
Can just for the gift story.
Oh, so we're making a story about this, and so one of my Sonni stories, and so whenever someone gives me a compliment, it used to make me extremely nervous, just to make me feel anxious, and like, just my anxiety would kick in. I would feel, I couldn't really describe it, just like a fear,
Triggered.
almost afraid. No, it's like almost afraid but nervous at the same time.
Hmm.
And so I would kind of, and I would be like, well, I read somewhere that and so I, over the years, I learned to mask that, of course, so nobody would notice. But the other day, my stepson He's a wonderful young man, and his girlfriend, who is also wonderful, she got me a birthday present, and it was this huge bag with all these presents in here. And in the back of my mind, I wanted to get up and run out of the room and hide. But I took the gift. I was grateful for it. I love her. She's a wonderful woman. But the problem is because of those things, so because of the grooming that was done to me as a child, when someone is nice to me, when someone gives me compliments, when someone buys me things, when someone does something for me, it frightens me, because that's usually the beginning of abuse. In my past, that was the beginning of something awful. So that's just kind of how it kind of go. And here I'm 52 years old and I'm still there. And it's like, but you still have that because you're afraid. It's just, and you can't really explain it. It's just there.
Right. Well, it's an absolute trigger, right? It triggers
Yeah,
this
exactly. It's a trick.
feeling. Yeah, it triggers this
Yeah.
feeling that you had.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant of you to say that families don't see this because they've been groomed as well. I think this is the one thing I love about your organization is you're bringing all of this light around that. And people forget that when a
Yeah.
child goes to them and says, "Hey, XYZ over there, I don't feel comfortable." They're like, "Oh my God, he's a wonderful
You go,
man."
yes, he would
Oh,
never do that.
right. Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing to remember that they're groomed around this. One of the other things that you talked about was policies in churches.
Yeah.
So the Wilsons target on churches, which I absolutely love, and other nonprofits and that sort of thing. But we know that pedophiles hide in churches because it's an easy target. I'm a CASA worker here in Montana, and we did this really good training called When Faith Hurts. It was so sad to me to hear how many pedophiles go to churches, and you know what they said? They're an
Mhm.
easy target. So talk,
Absolutely.
isn't that crazy? So I love what you're doing. So talk about how many churches have policies in place to make sure that you're not a pedophile? How many churches you take fingerprints? How many churches have a policy? Talk to me about that little.
Not as far as we can tell, not a lot. We've asked a couple around where we are, and we've done a lot of just surveys and things. And as far as we can tell, not a lot that we've checked. Well, and the reason being is because it's expensive. A lot of
Mhm.
people, and a lot of times, so there are a lot of different organizations that do this, that do background checks, things, but they charge. And that's where we're different, is because our services are all based on donations. We don't we don't want you to think we're giving you a handout, but we don't want there to be any barriers for protecting children. So
Mhm.
our services are all donation based. Whatever you feel like you can give, that's fine. We just want to help, and that's how we operate. So um that's the biggest thing. Is a lot of churches don't think they need it. And there's like a number of reasons. I believe in the
I
percentage of
would love to hear, honestly, Sonia, I would love to hear why you don't need one because pedophiles are actually better at telling lies than people are at telling the
they
truth.
don't realize, they don't get it. It's like, oh man, but it's, and I don't know, but they don't think they need it. Sometimes and then a lot of times people think, oh, well, kids make stuff up. That's another one. And I'm going, that
Right,
is that is like less than 5% of children are actually
right.
making, it's so rare that
It's so rare.
yeah, but and then people say that they do, that's another thing we've heard is that, and it was that they think that it's not true, or
Hmm.
they're making it up, or they're exaggerating, or just trying to get attention. It's always the victim's fault somehow, is what it
Right.
comes back down to. And so, and another thing is just we found it's a very uncomfortable subject for people. I think.
Oh, don't you and I both
Oh,
know it?
yeah, it's such an uncomfortable subject. And I'm
Yes.
like, that's what makes it worse. That's what makes it keep festering, because nobody wants to talk about it. Yes, it's an awful thing. You're right. But we have to talk about it. We have to address it. Otherwise, it's going to keep happening. You have
Well,
to.
they live in the secrets. And so what
Yes.
happens is the churches allow this secret place that pedophiles actually just thrive in because
Yes.
I think it's a lot of fear.
Yeah.
People, they look at people and they don't use discernment at all, because if you were talking to the Spirit of God, you'd be like, whoa, that guy's a pedophile. But then
Yeah.
when you feel it, right, then the
Yeah.
problem is people don't trust their instinct, because they
Yeah.
think, well, he doesn't, have a trench coat and no teeth.
Yeah.
When,
And then what I was
go
gonna say,
ahead.
don't forget, we're Christians, so we're supposed to forgive.
Oh boy, don't
That's
get me
the other part.
started on
They know
that.
that too. They know that too. They know that we're supposed to
Yes, they
forgive.
do.
So yeah, they know everything we're supposed to do, and they use that against us to have
Oh my gosh, preach it. I'm telling you, it is absolutely so true. They actually know the rules better than we do. And
exactly.
Satan used the Bible against Jesus himself.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so,
That's
right. No,
yes.
it's so very, very true. And I think
Yeah.
yeah, I just love that bringing this awareness is remarkable, because it is where they hide. And I see so many things on the internet about that are Christian based about forgiveness. To
Yeah.
me, forgiveness separates us from our abusers. It doesn't keep us close to them.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
absolutely separates us, right? So talk to me a little bit about your own personal story, just so I can understand, the viewer can understand what happened in your life that you said, because clearly in my life, I'm doing this because I had horrible abuse in my past. And anybody listening to my podcast knows my story. But, my story started when, with both of my parents when I was very young, and it ended with both of my parents in my teen years. And so I needed to do something, right? Because there's this beautiful quote that says, in the face of evil, to do nothing is evil itself. So talk
Ooh,
to me a little bit about, isn't that true, right? So when people say, why
yeah.
do you do all this? Go live free.
Yeah.
Because I can't not. I
Exactly. Oh my
can't
God.
not.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about your background and your experience with this. I wonder, did it happen in a church? Those kinds of things.
Well, well, I'm a survivor of abuse throughout my life, actually. It wasn't until I want to say in my 30s, um,
That you began to talk.
that I began to stand up for myself.
Hmm.
So I would say, I had abuse from my mom, my father, my stepfather, and then boyfriends, and then my first husband. So it wasn't until um, in my 30s, I found my voice and I went back to school. I went to college, grad school. I raised 3 kids, and so around that time is when, and once that was in I had I had 2 very sick children. One of them was deathly sick, but he's, by God's grace, he's here and he's fine.
Awesome.
So, but once I got him through all that, it was like, I think God said, okay, it's time for you to understand what's wrong with you. And so, because I couldn't make friends, I didn't trust anybody.
Hmm.
Um, I never, I spent my days barricaded in my bedroom. Because that was the only safe spot, slightly the safest spot that I could ever feel was in my bedroom, locked away from the world. I never was in my living room or anything like that, because those weren't safe spaces for me.
Right. I
So
understand.
yeah, so it was like I had this big, beautiful house, and I was in one room, just hidden away. So,
Mm,
but and I knew my actions. I had memory problems, and and my daughter said, "Mom, you never cry, you never show any emotion," just
mhm,
things like that. And I was like, okay, so I'm gonna go and see what's going on here, and that's when around the yeah, no, but this wasn't until like my 30s or 40s, around then, once I was done with school and everything, was in my 40s by then. And that's when I went to a therapist and said, and they diagnosed me with, I knew I thought I had PTSD, but they said, no, you have complex PTSD and all the
mhm,
different side effects that go with that. And so the depersonalization, derealization, the disassociation, all those things were all
mhm.
rolled up
It's
in there.
debilitating.
Yes, and I didn't know I had it, and I was just, and so for me to be diagnosed with that, I think it was like a was like maybe on the third or fourth visit, he was just like, yeah, it's
Mhm.
obvious. So,
Well, it's validating. Yeah, it's validating, right?
it was validating, but it was scary. I spent a
It
lot of
is
time
scary.
in denial because I didn't remember my childhood. I didn't, I mean, and I don't mean just now, but I was 20 and I couldn't remember my childhood, and neither could my older brother. And so, and my mother would fill in and she'd, oh, you had a great childhood. And I'd be like,
Hmm.
yeah, and I'm like, okay. Yeah, we didn't have a lot of money, but we loved each other. We had a good childhood. And she would tell me that, and I was like, okay, then, okay.
Right.
So it was good. All
You
right.
just keep telling her story and don't learn your own, right?
Exactly. And so I would tell people, oh, where's your child? It was a good childhood. And mommy said,
Hmm.
it was a good child. So, and so I knew my mom, because my mother, I respect her and I love her. However, she is a narcissistic mother. And so, and all that that entails. And so that's a difficult mom to have. And so, um, it was hard. And so, and I figured that out earlier on. So I knew not to, at the time, so once everything started coming out through therapy, and yeah, we're talking 3 days a week therapy. Oh my gosh, therapy was so bad. My therapy sessions left me exhausted and crying, and I didn't cry up until then.
Right.
I was crying after that. And so, I mean, I would be crying nonstop, for hours after therapy, and so, having awful flashbacks and just stuff that because once the therapist started getting into
Hmm.
the back of what was all hidden from me, um, I was able to see it all, and
Well, it's like a floodgate opens, isn't it?
yes,
I
it's
know
like, oh my
all
God.
about it. And your whole life goes on pause because
Yes, and you're
all
like,
of a sudden you're like, this is who I am.
yes, you're like, oh my gosh, what?
Yes.
I used to say it's like I used to tell them all the time, you opened up a door. Apparently there
Yep.
was a door somewhere. You opened it up and let all this crazy in. And so you'd be like, well, it was there. You need to know. So,
Right.
and for a long time I was like, well, and so I was dealing with that. I was in and out of denial. I kept saying, maybe this didn't happen. Maybe because I
Hmm.
just didn't want it. I didn't want it to happen. And so because I mean, because I couldn't remember my childhood, I was like, well, maybe, I would make one up. I said, this is who I am. Yeah, yeah,
Ah, everything's good.
it was great
Right.
too, and it was an awesome one too. And so, and
No,
so,
I think you're so right. People do fill in a blank with that. Well, I'll just say it's good. And mom said it was good.
yeah,
So I'm just going to
exactly.
keep
She
telling
said it was
that
good, so
story.
it was good, done. And so I would be like, and so he was just kind of, so when all this was coming out, it was so hard to accept it. I think it took me about a year and a half to say, okay,
Mhm.
clearly, and I'm talking, crying and having all these different episodes, one of which left me frozen in place for, because I couldn't move. It was,
No,
just
I
all these
understand.
awful moments, just, because you get triggered and you just freeze, and, and just,
Right. Well, when that memory comes back, it feels like you're there. You
yeah, it's
you have to walk back through it and you're like, "Oh, I totally understand."
yeah,
It's beautiful that you're explaining it.
yeah, and I'm like, I remember one time I was like cleaning my bedroom, and all of a sudden I saw a long, you ever see those long magnets that you put down in the car to get little magnet to get something out of
Oh,
the,
yes.
yeah,
Yes.
I pulled that out and I stretched it out and I said, and it reminded me of something I had gotten beaten with as a child.
Oh,
And
right.
so before I knew it, I dropped and was trying to hide in my closet under I was like, oh my God. It was just, so, and my son's going, Mom, you okay?
You know what though? And I want you to continue, but the most beautiful thing is I interviewed a therapist once, and I also was in therapy for many, many years.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you're doing it right, you should feel like you're 5 or whenever you got that beating. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
actually true healing. Just for the person that's listening, if you can just talk about it and you don't want to run and hide,
Yes.
you haven't got to the emotion yet. That's actually really, really positive that you just explained it that way, because
Oh
that's
my gosh, I
exactly
was just
what
like,
that healing. Well,
yeah, I
that's
was
good though. That's true
because I'm
healing.
trying to fit this whole body.
Right. And
I
I'm so
know I shouldn't
sorry.
want to do this, but
Right.
so, and so, but yeah, and so once but I still kind of had my moments, and God is so wonderful in that, I remember, and I kept thinking, why, how was I able to do all these different, because I was raised in the projects on welfare. I come from a family of welfare recipients. And from the moment I was pregnant with my first child, I was like, this is my baby. I can raise my baby. I don't need the government. I looked at welfare as an insult to my ability to take care of my child. So it was never, so I have worked since I was 14, and I worked myself and made sure went to college, grad school, and all these different things, and raised these three kids.
Congratulations, sweetie. I love that.
Thank you. And
I didn't.
but that's okay. You do, but I think God knew what I wanted and what the kids needed. And so I feel like he just put all that away for me and said, I'm going to make it so you can do this. I'm gonna push all this away for you. And I honestly feel that he protected me by pushing all this away, so I wouldn't dwell on the awfulness of my childhood, and it wouldn't be, it wouldn't destroy me like that. And I remember all those nights when my kids were little, we would pray every night that God would help me take care of my babies every night. That was our prayer. And so he answered that prayer completely. He made sure I could take care of them and raise them. And they, they lived in the suburbs. They had a great life. And so, but I mean, they had a robotic mom, but they still had a good life because I wasn't, I was kind of robotic, but I was there, so, but I did that. And so, I know that he blessed me with that. And so, as my brother, and then when I talked to my older brother, so what I learned later is that once your body realizes you're no longer in trouble, it starts giving you memories. And so my brother my older brother, he started getting memories, because remember, he couldn't remember his childhood either. So he called me up and he said, I'm starting to have these strange memories. And these strange, and he would, and
the older we get, the harder it is to hide those memories, but keep going.
Yes. And I remember thinking it was upsetting for me, but I never said anything to my mom. But when I found out that my older brother went through awfulness too, she let it happen to him too. Oh, I cussed her out. I wouldn't do it either.
That's okay.
I lost my temper then. She called me and I let her have it, because, she tried to blame it on my stepdad or my dad. I said, no, it was you. I remember, and so so, and it was,
it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And so she's trying to explain it away, and she, and so it was difficult, but, and so but I had to get that anger out. I feel like that needed to happen.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's a small thing for what happened to you.
But I felt so bad, because I'm like, you're supposed to honor your mother. You're supposed to, so I'm always trying.
You don't have to be religious through healing.
Exactly. So I'm like, but as I got better, I remember my last thing was that, my therapist said, maybe you should date, you should get out there and, and you should meet somebody. And I said, and I remember laughing at him, and I said, don't you know, God hates me. And he said, what I said, God hates me. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm gonna be alone forever. God hates me. And I think God said, oh, really? Oh, really? Is that what you think? So, because then I think about a month or two later, I meet my husband, who is wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love him to death, but he took me back. And I always thought in the back of my mind, I said, whoever God wants me to be with, they're going to bring me back to him. And sure enough, that's the first thing he did.
Oh,
and so
that's beautiful.
I love him to death. And so we moved to Virginia, because he was like, I want you to just breathe. I don't want you to be looking around you, because I kept moving further and further away from my family. And so he was like, I just want you to breathe. I want you to relax, and I want to take you somewhere where you could just relax and just. And so we have an acre of property out here. Our dogs just run around like maniacs.
Oh, it's awesome.
Great house in Virginia. And it was like, okay. And, we felt like God was speaking to us to do something. And since he used to be a youth pastor.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
And he has all of his sons are also pastors or ordained ministers.
Oh, so that's beautiful.
His oldest son married us. Wonderful. Anyway, so he's wonderful.
That's cool.
Isn't it? So, but so we felt that God's calling on us was to help people and help kids, and just try to help people before this doesn't happen to anybody else. And I found the biggest thing was that church, I think a lot of times churches don't even think about it. And
Yeah, and I can't, right? And you have all of these babies
yes,
everywhere.
and
And I don't think they think about it. I think
no,
you're
they don't
so
think,
right, Sony. I
yeah,
don't think they think about it.
they don't even think, I don't think it's like, it's not all the time that they just don't want to. I think they just they don't even think about it because that's not where their heads is. So why in the world would they think that's where somebody else's head is?
Right. No, I get that. How now are you guys reaching out to churches?
We're sending out emails and letters. We're trying to kind of a grassroots thing, just sending out mail, and we're doing different things on Facebook and things like that. We're really working on that part. That's kind of the toughest part, is trying to get people to kind of know that we're here and know that we're here to help.
Right.
And
And you are, is it ppekids.org that people can go to if there's any, and I know actually I've had pastors' wives and that sort of thing reach out through listening to this. If anybody's out there listening and you can help in any way, please do. You guys were also looking for a tech person to help you. Talk about that for a minute, because I
oh
want to
yeah,
give you guys as much exposure as possible because I think it's just beautiful what you guys are doing. And I love that God calls people in these unique
yes,
ways. It's just
he
so
did.
cool.
Yes. And so the tech part, Bob, you're gonna have to say something.
Come on, Bob, come over here and meet us. You're
I don't know
absolutely
tech stuff.
fine.
I would just say computer.
Please come in and join us. It's so nice to meet
Hi,
you. How
Jenny. How
are
are
you?
you? Good.
Good. Well, I
Um,
really do research before I do this, and I just really want to give you guys this exposure because it really is a cool thing that you guys are doing. And I'm so taken aback that God is so unique and creative, right? That you guys are doing this and I'm doing this, but networking and all that is so important. And I saw on on your website. So any tech people out there, listen to what Bob's going to say next.
well, I think like Sonny said that it's really a challenge to reach churches, and so we're looking, we're just starting in the early stages of this. However, we're realizing that it could easily scale, and with that, um, marketing I think is our first.
Oh,
Marketing is your first is our first party, is trying to get
Mhm.
churches um and get awareness out. I think that's probably our first thing. I have been doing the website, and I'm sure you can tell. And so although that is a priority, the most, I think the biggest thing is the email marketing and the Google and the Facebook, and so we need some help with that. If someone wants to help us
Yeah.
with that. But right now we're just pushing forward. I've been unemployed for a while, and I felt like this is such a weird thing to say. Uh, so God shared with me Matthew 6:33 that talks about seek ye first the kingdom of God. And so um, we were doing this last year, and we ran into the holidays, and so I lost my job soon thereafter, and so I was being the man trying to um, get a job and saying, "Well, God, we'll do this afterwards." And I felt like God's just been really speaking to me that you seek first the kingdom, and then all those things
Mhm.
happen afterwards. And so I had that in like June, and I'm like, yeah, that's a good scripture. And I lead a men's group, and so I didn't listen. And then God really convicted me. And again, I jumped back on, and we've been going at it nonstop for the last few months, and really feel like, if we put this before the Lord and we do what he says and we're obedient, and then everything else, if we never have any exposure, or if we have more than we can handle, that's not up to me. That's not up to
Yeah.
Sonny. What that's up to God. And so all we're to do is be obedient and let him do the rest. Because that's all.
Oh, I love it. And you know what's interesting? I often, and God has heard you because I found you on Twitter, which I do some things on Twitter, but mostly I blog and do all my work other places. But I just ran into you guys. And so to reach out, and then I just think it's so important for Christians to network. And anybody that's listening too that wants to help them, please jump on the ppekids.org and
Correct.
help them. I mean, I think it's just such a beautiful thing because it, again, what you guys are doing is so important. Often what I talk about in a lot of these podcasts are that pedophiles sit right behind the spirit of religion because they know they can hide there, right? And so it's so hugely important that we do get this awareness out. And I thought, Sony, it was very wise of you to say churches don't think about it. And I can't, you have these precious cargo, you have these babies with you that were and you can't tell what a pedophile looks like. They're women, they're men, they're teenagers, they're, people that have come through this. So I think that it's just it's unique and it's creative of God to put you guys in this role. And I'm honored to have you guys on. And anything that you guys want to share that would be, of use, because we do have thousands of people listen to this. We're on Anchor and Apple and all over. It's just such a unique thing that you do. And so that's why I asked you, how do you find churches? Because, you'd almost do have to do it where you email and then who's going to listen. Churches often big churches have these websites. You hope they have policies, right? I
Yeah.
have to tell you though, sometimes when I follow Christians, I read their organization because I'm curious, right? Like, because of course, Sony, you and I come from this place of deep distrust. So I
Yeah.
always will research who they are. And they often have these contact forms. You guys should fill that out and say, hey, I'd love to know if you have a policy. You know what I mean? A lot of churches have those. It might
Yeah.
be a good way that wouldn't cost you anything just to reach out and say, you fill out those contact forms. Yeah, I have a testimony to share with you. God's got me here doing this. How you protecting your kids?
Exactly. Because I think that's the biggest thing, is that if they're not thinking about it, then they're not looking for us. So we have to go look for
Ex-
them.
I think it's true. Yeah. And I love that you're here, and use this, please use this, cut it up, use it. I often will just take clips of this when I have time because I have a full-time job as well, and put it out there. So I think, and the work that you guys are doing, please talk to me about this because I went on your Twitter page and I always kind of research before I reach out. I love that you guys put on there all of these offenses that are in churches. Where do you guys find those stories? And talk to me about some of those stories you find. So, for the listener, if you go on their page, they do this work that'll say, this person came out of this church and did this act of criminal sexual abuse to a child. And I'm really proud of you guys for showing the awareness there. Talk to me about that some.
I think for
Mhm.
the most part, it's on Twitter
Yeah.
because unfortunately, if you hashtag CSA
Mhm.
on Twitter, you're gonna find a plethora of we'll find your site and all the other people that have what I love and which is heartbreaking all in the same breath is that there's a lot of people that in their Twitter bio will have that they're a CSA survivor.
Right.
And so when so sometimes I'm just seeing someone that's like that, that has that in their bio, but oftentimes I'm seeing uh, you know, uh, news clippings, and so we just want to create awareness because I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
having been part of a church, you don't think of the danger all the time. We saw this video probably a week or so ago and said that churches are so programmed to think about the offender. So they'll lock the doors and they'll have, guys with walkie-talkies and
Mhm.
but that's only 6% of the abduction offender is only
Mhm.
6%.
Mhm.
Wow,
They
see,
said that
right.
94% is the preferential, where they know they've gained trust through the grooming that Sonny talked about before.
Hmm.
So I think that when, thankfully my kids and Sonny's kids are older, but we have grandkids. And so
Hmm.
I think when we talk about that, I think it sort of seems like a non-Christian thing to not be trusting. if we're not trusting people, it seems like we're hiding something, or we have an issue in our life. However, if you're overly trusting, it could be the expense of your child.
Well, right. You're not being wise as a serpent because Jesus also said, I send you out and be wise as a gentle as a dove and wise as a serpent. And that is, I love this conversation because it's bringing awareness. We are not supposed to be chumps just because we're Christians. And when I listened to that, Faith Hurts, and it was talking about this was a man who came out of law enforcement, and then he came in to bring awareness to people. And you cannot believe how cunning these pedophiles are. And they loved going to churches because they said it was just so easy. That's terrible, you guys. The only Jesus didn't talk about a lot of judgment when he was here, but I'll tell you one judgment he did talk about. He said, if you are to hurt a child, it's better that a millstone be hung from your neck and you be thrown into the deepest water. So I do think that we have a responsibility as Christians to protect these children because it is the one thing he didn't talk about a lot of other sins. Think about that. But he did talk about that. That's a huge thing, right, Bob? To your point, we need to be wise in these situations. So talk to
Well,
me about you said, well, go ahead and say what you were going to say, but you said you were in a church that you didn't even think of it.
I, as so I was in ministry probably for, I think, 10 years as youth pastor. And we ran into situations that were, within the family, but we didn't we just didn't have the education that we have now. We didn't have the
Right.
awareness that because of social media, because of all this information. And so now I think it seems so non-Christian to be um distrusting. However, the cost is so big.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like I Sonny and I were on we were looking for curriculum, like, okay, so what do we say when a church asks us, well, how do we teach about this? And so I have a writer friend, um, and I challenged him to make curriculum or make stories that would actually address this situation, because I think a lot of parents or a lot of pastors or youth or children's pastors don't know how to address this. They don't know what to say. They don't have curriculum. And so as far as I know, there's no curriculum out there for them to teach. And you there's not that many stories out there that are suitable for church, and suitable for age groups. So when I was talking to my friend Mike, I said, what we want is if you bring, let's say, one story, but put it targeted towards 4 different age groups. And so there would be a watered down version for the youngest kids, and then slowly graduate up to the older kids. But there's not that much material, and so we're saying this, equip, and yet how do we deal with the kids? How do we communicate that to the kids? And so another thing that if any one of your viewers, we need people to write curriculum. We need people to write, and hopefully it'll be financially advantageous for them. But it's something that we need to put stuff in the
Yeah, and
church.
actually, I will send you guys some. I cannot think of the organization right now. But there is another woman who actually I have on my queue list to talk to, and she does have curriculum, and she
Oh,
does
really?
actually, yes, she actually does teach about this. And I'll send that link to you because you know what? This collaboration amongst Christians is super important, right? Because we do it in the business world all the time. And it's so important for us to all to connect and do that. And yet I love also that you teach the people who are in leadership about this, right? Because children so often get swayed in other directions so easily. You know what I mean? Babies are just so vulnerable that we can't leave it all on their shoulders to teach them that, your private area and don't have anybody touch that except your parents. I just don't think babies get it. And so I think the leadership that you guys are doing, I haven't seen a lot of curriculum for leadership. I know that this woman does have some, and I'll have to research that because I don't want to misspeak. But I love that you guys are going saying, look, let's look at your people. Because here's the other thing. You can teach them, but if you don't walk in discernment with wisdom, you're going to miss these pedophiles. I'm telling you, they are better at telling a lie than we are at telling the truth. I know because I was raised by them. I've seen them. They're just incredibly crafty. And so I like the services that you guys do where you say we're going to fingerprint, we're going to do face recognition. I saw that you guys had that on there. I think these things are hugely important because when you follow pedophiles, they just go reinvent themselves and go somewhere else, you guys. You see it in these documentaries where they just go from church to church to church
Yeah.
because unfortunately, we're being really unwise in how our leadership is looking at this. And the truth is you keep saying, and I know it's true, it's unchristian like, but I don't want to be religious. You know what, Bob? I want to be godly. And yes, that makes us good, but I don't, if I hurt your feelings though and save a child, I'm not really sure I care. So,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? And so, for all of this Christendom and this religious spirit thing, we've got to protect our children. And I haven't seen a lot of people doing what you're doing. I think it's incredibly unique. And I think it's really, God is creative, right? And I think that Satan isn't as creative as God is at all. I don't think he can create. I think God creates. So I just think it's so neat to have you guys on and to talk about this and keep going on that leadership. And I will, if you guys have anything, you want to say your email address that they can reach out to you is probably on ppekids.org. But how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me because I'm unemployed right now.
Oh,
So
You have time.
I have a little bit more time than Sonny does. So
it's
it's Bob at PPEkids.org.
yeah.
But I wanted to say one thing that
No, you have plenty of time.
I wanted to say one thing that when you mentioned the techie part, I was in the army and I have a security background and I have um I used to be a pastor, and so I have like this unique. I'm reminded of that song that there's no waste at the altar. And if you haven't heard that song, oh my
I
gosh.
know
Anyway,
it. I love it.
so everything that God has brought us through, I believe is equipped us for where we are now. And so
100%.
um, and it's heartbreaking for what you've been through, for what Sonny's been through. And we live in a fallen world
Hmm.
but when you can take something the devil made or intended for bad and you can turn it to good and save other kids, that's when you sort of spit in the face of the devil and you realize that you're not gonna win. And and
Exactly.
and, and so you elevate yourself. But um when you were talking about the techie part, I have this dream, and Sonia's gonna laugh, but that's okay. But I have this dream that I think the way to not get beat, and I hate to lose. So
Me too.
the way to not get beat by a pedophile is facial recognition software.
I love it.
Because what they can do is they can actually say, um, they're changing their name and they move to a different area. And so if I'm looking for Joe Smith,
Well, that's brilliant.
and so, but they can't full facial rec. And so we've signed up with E-Verify. So we're gonna try to get their social security number to match who they say they are. But if they've, like you said, they're creative and they're sneaky,
Hmm.
but I hate to lose. And so
Hmm.
my dream of the whole thing is to say, if we can actually do fingerprints, we can actually do E-Verify. We can run them through the National Sex Offender Registry. However, but you can't be facial rec, and you can fool me, but you can't fool that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so when you realize that
Yeah, I love it.
how many names are on there, and if I move to Nevada all of a sudden, no
Hmm.
one's gonna know who I and I change my name, no one's gonna know who I am. And I'm actually starting to work on the video about runners. And that's when we get close, and all of a sudden that a prominent member of the church runs because the church is introducing that we're going to do these checks. And all of a sudden they realize that they're close to getting caught, and they disappear, or they're never to be heard from again. And that could be a family friend, that could be a pastor, that could be a deacon, that could be an usher. And so I think that we have to be really sharp, and we have to be on our game, and we have to use every technology available to us
Oh, I love it.
to make sure that you know what because we have this idea that if they can jump through all these hoops, right? We have this like elite,
And we've watched them.
so we have this way that if you do these 10 things, that we're gonna feel pretty safe. But the main thing is facial rec. And I know that that's a big ask, and I know that that's a big price tag. However, I want to win.
Right. Well, and God wants to win. And I think it's so beautiful, honestly, that you guys are doing this. And you guys have a creative place that I haven't heard anybody. And I talk to a lot of people. I'm out here doing a lot of work just on my own. I think it's just so beautiful. And so we're at time. But Father, I just really want to pray just blessings over this work. And don't quit thinking that way, because the truth is pedophiles need to get scared. You know what? God is raising an army that looks a little bit different. I think we're getting closer to the end times, and he wants to find those children that are now adults that are hurt, because nobody talks about it until they're much older. But there's still, we think children are safe now because there's all of this stuff. They're not safe, you guys. Pedophiles are amazing. They just get smarter, to Bob's point. So what we need to do is get smarter in the face of this as well. And so keep doing this work. Anybody listening that can help, please reach out to these two. You guys, is there anything that we've missed that you'd like to say? Because we are at time. And thank you so much for taking time out of your evening and being here. Please feel free to use this. I'll send this recording to you. I think that your videos are wonderful, by the way. I saw one that you posted on Twitter. You guys do a really good job. I wish I could do a better job at it. I'm kind of a novice myself, but you know what? God helps us. So your videos are really, really nice. So is there anything that you guys would like to say in closing?
Check out our classes, our resources. We're making new resources to help parents identify grooming behaviors online and different things like that. Because I think that happens, with all the missing children and things like that that are just suddenly gone. I think a lot of times they're met with pedophiles online, and they're getting a hold of them that way as well. So I think so we have different sheets for that, and different information sheets, and different and different things like that, and how to talk to them about what's happening with their children online, and how to check for that, and where to look and what to look for. So keep checking our reference pages for information on how to protect your children and your grandchildren, or children in your program. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to share your story. There's information to check to share, to reach out for us for that, and we'd be happy to post your story online, just to help you heal, and so someone, so you can get it out. And so I think that's about it.
I would just say one other thing. We put videos on, and there's been recent news stories about, if you see the little reel that we have about sleepovers, the guy that, did you hear about the guy that tried to drug the 9-year-old? He had his 9-year-old and her friends over for a sleepover, and he drugged the smoothies that they had, and luckily it didn't take for one of the girls, and she called for help and was saved, but the guy's serving time. So sleepovers are not safe. And then there's a thing that I guess I just heard about, but I guess it's about a year old, that there's this game, and I forget the name of the game, but the game is targeted towards children. And so the makers of this game, either on purpose or an accident, left the back door open so adults could track where the locations were. And so this one little
Oh.
girl that was like 10 years old was online, and the guy was from Georgia, and he said, "Oh, you're from New Jersey. I am too. What neighborhood are you from?" He traveled from Georgia all the way to New Jersey and met up with her, took her for 3 days.
Oh man.
And eventually found him. And I don't know if what happened. However, video games, if you're a parent and you're not paying attention, you know, kids will find a way to chat and be, because of COVID and video games and all that stuff, we've come into the age of social is being in front of the computer for a child, a teenager. And that's not the way we probably grew up. We were outside and on our bikes and doing stuff, but for them, it's totally different. And if you're not paying attention, then you're missing something. And so get involved with your kids, watch what they're,
Yes.
don't assume that a sleepover is fine. Don't assume that their game is fine. Just got to be vigilant. So
Right. Don't be too trusting. There's nothing wrong with having people earn your trust. There really isn't. You guys, thank you so much. God bless your endeavors. I'm going to put all of their contact information in the description of this podcast. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Give me a follow if you like what we're doing. It helps out here. All right, you guys, God bless. See you next
thanks,
time.
Joe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.